The audacity of standing in my living room, demanding my property while wearing the tennis bracelet my husband bought her with our money, should have been the most shocking part of my day. But after 6 months of discovering affair after affair, nothing about Brendan or his mistress Catherine surprised me anymore. My name is Grace, and I'm 38 years old. I built my real estate development company from nothing, starting with flipping a single condemned house at 23 with money I'd saved from 3 jobs. 15 years later, I owned properties across the state, employed 50 people, and had a reputation for turning abandoned buildings into architectural gems. The lake house had been my crown jewel, a 1920s mansion I'd spent 2 years restoring to its original glory. I met Brendan when I was 28 at a charity auction where I was donating a weekend at one of my rental properties. He was charming, attentive, and seemed genuinely interested in my work. Unlike other men I'd dated, he didn't feel threatened by my success. Or so I thought. "I love that you're so independent," he'd said on our 3rd date. "I want a partner, not a dependent." We married 2 years later. I kept my business separate, maintaining all my properties as premarital assets. Brendan had his own career in medical equipment sales, good money, frequent travel, respectable enough that no one questioned why I was the primary breadwinner. The lake house came into my life 3 years into our marriage. A colonial mansion on 50 acres, abandoned for decades after a fire destroyed the east wing. Everyone said I was crazy to take it on. "That place is cursed," the local realtor had warned. 3 developers have tried and given up. "It's a money pit." But I saw potential where others saw problems. I spent weekends there, camping in the habitable sections while I directed renovations. Brendan occasionally joined me, though he complained about the dust and noise. I restored every original detail: the hand-carved banisters, the stained glass windows, the marble fireplaces. It became my sanctuary, my proof that I could resurrect beauty from ruin. The first sign of trouble came when Brendan started suggesting I slow down. "You're always at that house," he'd complain. "What about us?" I tried to balance better, scheduling specific weekends for us. But then came the comments about my appearance. "You used to dress up more," he'd say, eyeing my work clothes with distaste. "Remember when you wore dresses?" "I wear dresses to events," I'd remind him. "But I can't exactly restore hardwood floors and heels." The criticism escalated. I was too focused on work, too tired in the evenings, too dusty, too ambitious, too much. I started doubting myself, wondering if I was failing as a wife. So I tried harder, scheduled more date nights, bought new clothes, pretended interest in his endless stories about surgical equipment specifications. Then, 6 months ago, I found the credit card statement he'd hidden in his car. Jewelry purchases, hotel rooms, restaurants I'd never been to. The cliché was almost insulting. Did cheating husbands have no imagination? I hired a private investigator, telling myself I needed proof before confronting him. What I got was a dossier that read like a bad romance novel. Not 1 mistress, but 3. Catherine was the main one, a 26-year-old pharmaceutical rep who'd been sleeping with my husband for 2 years. 2 years of working late and sales conferences and golf weekends with clients. The investigator had photos, credit card records, even recordings of Brendan promising Catherine he'd leave me once the timing was right. Apparently, the timing hinged on my lake house renovation being complete, so he could claim it in the divorce as marital property. "She's loaded," he'd told Catherine in one recording. "But that lake house is worth $4 million now that she's fixed it up. My lawyer says if I wait until our 10-year anniversary, I can claim I contributed to its value." Our 10-year anniversary was in 3 months. I spent a week processing this information, crying in my office, raging in my car. Then I dried my tears and got strategic. If Brendan wanted to play property games, he'd picked the wrong opponent. First, I moved everything valuable out of the lake house. The restored fixtures, the antique furniture I'd collected, the custom light installations, all carefully relocated to a warehouse. I replaced them with convincing replicas from estate sales and discount stores. Then I started the paperwork. As a developer, I had connections at the county planning office. I filed for a demolition permit, citing unexpected structural damage that made the house unsafe. The beauty of owning property outright is that you can do whatever you want with it. I also discovered something interesting in the city planning archives. The state was planning to expand the highway system. The proposed route ran right through my property. They'd been quietly approaching landowners about selling. I'd ignored their letters, but now I reconsidered. While setting these wheels in motion, I played the oblivious wife. I smiled at Brendan over dinner, asked about his day, pretended not to notice when he texted constantly through meals. I even suggested we host a party at the lake house for our anniversary. "That's months away," he said, barely looking up from his phone. "I know, but I want it to be special. The house will be perfect by then." He actually smiled at that. "Yeah, it's really coming together. You've done an amazing job with it, honey." Honey. From the man who called another woman baby in recorded conversations. 2 weeks before our anniversary, Brendan announced he needed to talk. I knew what was coming. The investigator had told me Catherine was pressuring him to leave me. "I've been unhappy," he started, using the script every cheating spouse seems to follow. "We've grown apart. You're married to your work, not me." I let him talk, watching him perform the role of tragic husband. He was building up to asking for a divorce when the doorbell rang. "I'll get it," I said, knowing exactly who it would be. Catherine stood on my doorstep in a designer dress and heels, looking like she'd prepared for a photo shoot. Behind her, Brendan's eyes widened in panic. "What are you doing here?" he hissed at her. "I'm done waiting," she announced, pushing past me into the house. "You promised you'd tell her this week." "And he did," I said calmly. "He was just asking for a divorce. Please come in. Let's discuss this like adults." They exchanged confused glances, but followed me to the living room. Catherine perched on my sofa like she owned it, while Brendan hovered nervously by the fireplace. "I know about the affair," I said simply. "All of them, actually. Catherine, Jennifer, and what was the third one's name? Melissa?" Brendan's face went white. Catherine's expression hardened. "Then you understand why this marriage is over." "Completely," I agreed. "And I'm willing to make this easy. Brendan, I'll give you a simple divorce. No alimony battles, no dragging this through court." "Really?" He looked suspicious but hopeful. "Really. But Catherine has a point. She's been through emotional distress. The lying, the sneaking around, waiting for you to leave your wife. That must have been so hard." Catherine preened at my apparent sympathy. "Exactly. I've suffered. Which is why," I continued, pulling out a set of keys, "I'm giving you the lake house." Both their jaws dropped. Brendan found his voice first. "The lake house? But that's worth millions." "For million, according to your last appraisal," I confirmed. "But Catherine deserves compensation for her emotional distress, don't you think? And you've always said you contributed to its renovation." Yes, of course," he stammered, greed overcoming surprise. "I picked out a lot of the fixtures, consulted on the design." I bit back a laugh. He'd picked out exactly nothing, and complained through every consultation. "Then it's settled," I said, handing the keys to Catherine. "The house is yours. I'll have my lawyer draw up the papers transferring ownership as part of the divorce settlement." Catherine clutched the keys like she'd won the lottery. Thank you. This is very generous. There are just a few minor details," I added casually. "The house needs some work. I've been putting off some maintenance, and there's a small issue with the Eastern Foundation. Nothing major. Also, the property taxes are due next month, about $40,000. And the county has been sending notices about some potential zoning changes, but I'm sure that's nothing to worry about." "$40,000? Brendan squeaked. "Annually. But for a $4 million property, that's reasonable." "Oh, and the septic system needs updating to meet new environmental codes. The estimate was around $80,000, but I'm sure you can find someone cheaper." I stood up, gathering my purse. "I'll stay at my apartment in the city while you two sort out the moving arrangements. Brendan, I'll have my lawyer send over the divorce papers. Congratulations on your new home, Catherine." I left them sitting in stunned silence, Catherine still clutching the keys like a talisman. The next 2 weeks were a flurry of legal activity. True to my word, I had papers drawn up transferring the lake house to them as part of the divorce settlement. Brendan was so eager to get his hands on the property that he agreed to all my terms. No alimony, clean split of other assets, and I kept my business entirely. "Are you sure about the house?" my lawyer asked. "It's worth a fortune." "Trust me," I said. "It's worth every penny to be rid of them." The day after the papers were signed and the divorce finalized, I got a frantic call from Brendan. "What did you do?" he screamed. "There's nothing here. The fixtures, the furniture, everything valuable is gone." "I removed my personal property," I said calmly. "The house itself is still there, isn't it?" "Barely. And I just got a notice from the state about highway expansion. They're offering $200,000 for the property." "Oh, that," I said. Yes, I've been ignoring their letters. But you might want to consider it. The demolition order goes into effect next month. Demolition order? Didn't I mention? The structural damage is worse than I thought. The whole east wing is compromised. County already approved the demolition. Of course, you could try to repair it, but the estimate was $3 million. Might be easier to just take the state's offer. You knew, he raged. You knew all of this. I tried to tell you about the maintenance issues, I reminded him. But you and Catherine seemed so eager. I didn't want to ruin the moment. The full scope of their situation unfolded over the following days. The property taxes I'd mentioned? I'd been fighting them for years due to an incorrect assessment. Without my lawyer, they'd have to pay the inflated amount or spend thousands fighting it. The septic system didn't just need updating. It needed complete replacement to meet new environmental standards. The county wasn't just considering zoning changes. They'd already approved them. The property could no longer be used for residential purposes. Best of all, the state's highway expansion was non-negotiable. They'd take the property through eminent domain if necessary. $200,000 for a property they thought was worth $4 million. Catherine left Brendan within a week, furious about the worthless house and the debt they'd assumed. Brendan tried to sue me for fraud, but my lawyer shut that down quickly. Your client insisted the property had value because of his contributions, my lawyer told his. My client simply agreed with his assessment. All issues with the property were matters of public record. Due diligence is the buyer's responsibility. The lake house was demolished 2 months later. I watched from across the lake as the walls came down, feeling oddly peaceful. That house had been my sanctuary, my achievement, my proof that I could create beauty. But Brendan and Catherine had tainted it with their greed and betrayal. Sometimes the best renovation is a complete teardown. I used the insurance money from the structural damage to buy a new property, a lighthouse on the coast that needed complete restoration. My new project, my new sanctuary, with no memories of betrayal attached. Brendan ended up declaring bankruptcy. The debts from the lake house, combined with legal fees and the lifestyle he couldn't afford without my income, crushed him. Last I heard, he was living in a studio apartment, selling medical equipment, and telling anyone who'd listen how his ex-wife ruined him. Catherine moved on to her next married target, though I heard she's more careful about property transfers now. As for me, I learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't keeping what others want. It's giving them exactly what they deserve. Brendan wanted my lake house because he thought it represented everything he was entitled to. My work, my success, my achievements. Catherine wanted it as proof she'd won, that she'd taken something valuable from the wife. They got what they wanted, a house. Just not the house they thought they were getting. I kept what actually mattered. My business, my dignity, and the satisfaction of watching their greed destroy them. They'd demanded compensation for emotional distress. I gave them a master class in what real distress looked like. The lake house is gone now, a highway running through where it once stood. But somewhere on the coast, a lighthouse is slowly returning to life under my careful hands. This time, I'm building something just for me. No husband to criticize the dust, no mistress to covet the results. And if someone asks about my past, about the husband who cheated and the house I gave away, I just smile and say, I gave them exactly what they deserved. Because sometimes the best revenge is simply letting people's greed lead them exactly where they belong, to nothing. Thanks for watching. See you again in the next video. Stay stunned.